welcome all of you to Gems from the Wisdom Traditions on this beautiful day, the 4th of September, 2020, when we are taking up a topic that is related to our theme for the week of self-discipline. And that topic is being called Vanquishing Victimism. Our speaker is Ramdas Lamb. He's a professor at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, and he's taught religious studies courses there for many years. He also has the experience of having been for nearly a decade a sadhu, a holy man, a mendicant in India, in a very disciplined ascetic tradition of monks. And so when he speaks to us of self-discipline, he knows whereof he speaks. He has some very definite experience on those lines himself. So I give you Ramdas Lamb.
Thank you. Thank you, Renee, and thank you everyone for being here. Renee and I talked about the topic, victimism, victimhood. I think it's something that a lot of our, especially our young people, kind of fall prey to, that approach of self-identity. And so I thought, and Renee asked me if I had something that I had written that might be useful. And so I sent, I gave her something that I think all of you got. Though the title doesn't really explain what it is, it's not vows to become a monk. That's not what it's about. But it's the vows that monks take, the vows that sadhus take. And what's important is not whether or not a person chooses to be a monk or a nun, but it's basically what vows do, okay? But first, I think we need to think about what is being a victim. I think of it as imprisonment, right? When you are a victim of something, you are imprisoned by that. When you are a victim of someone, you are imprisoned by them. Whether that's psychologically imprisoned or physically imprisoned. In India, in the Hindu tradition, they say there's three sources of those kinds of issues to us. And they are called Bhautik, Adhyatmic, and Daivik. Okay, and so the Daivik first, it's things that happen to us from the gods. That's traditionally what it meant. But really what it is a storm comes and destroys my house. I'm flooded out. There's a car accident and I'm injured. There's a fire and we lose our home, something like this. Or there's a drought, right? So these are things that happen to us that hurt us, that we can say victimize us, but it's nature, right? And that's not something that we can control, right? And then there's Bhautik, so in the world, the things of the world, people, and that's really what they're talking about. They're people, animals. Somebody steals your car, breaks into your house, you get in a fight with someone, these kinds of things, okay? That's another source of suffering, a source that we can say that, we become victims to. But then there's my own self. And my own self is where, in the Hindu tradition, they say 90% of the problems that you experience in life come from yourself. Okay? And so what is it? What is it that we become victim to, or that we become imprisoned with? And it's actually very simple to understand. It's our desires, our supposed needs, our fears, our attachments. Okay. Somebody once asked Mahatma Gandhi, what's the greatest power? And he said, the greatest power is renunciation. He's talking about power in the world, renunciation. That's why he was so powerful. And that's why the British couldn't control him, because they couldn't seduce him. He had no needs. They couldn't bribe him. He had no desires. They couldn't threaten him. He didn't care whether he lived or died. Right? So they had no control over him. That's when you're free. And so when I was a monk, we were taught practices to give us freedom so that we could do whatever we wanted. Now, as a monk, you can pretty much do whatever you want anyway in India, but to have an understanding of what it means to be truly free. So, so in this article that I wrote, and I'm dealing with monastic tradition, but these apply to everyday life. So and there's three things that I want to talk about. One is called a sankalp, which is setting up a situation. Okay, I commit a commitment. I commit that I'm going to do this particular thing. Let's use running a marathon. Okay, so I'm going to commit to run a marathon. So the first thing is I have to make that commitment. I'm going to run the marathon. Okay. Now the marathon comes in, say, December, and then maybe it's January. So I've got 10 months or 11 months to prepare. So my commitment is that I'm going to run a marathon. It's an anushthan. An anushthan is like, I call it a spiritual retreat, but it's really a time period during which, in that commitment, you're going to do things to fulfill it. Okay, so my anushthan is for the next 11 months, I'm going to do certain things to prepare me. So then the vows that I take are called vrat. And what are the vows? The vows are, okay, for the first week, I'm going to run 1 mile a day. And then for the next week, I'm going to run 2 miles a day. And I'll do that maybe for 2 weeks. And then for the 2 weeks after that, I'm going to run 4 miles a day. And then, and I set it up. Always you set up a vow, something that you can do. Never take a vow that you'll fail at. Okay? Don't try to do something. You can try to do whatever you want, but if you're going to take a vow to do something, you better do it. So if I make a commitment that for the next 11 months, I'm going to prepare myself to run a marathon, then the vows that I take are going to help create that preparedness. So those are, and I just mentioned the vows. So my vows, 1 mile a day, 2 miles, and then 2 miles a day, and then 4 miles a day, etc. But then also I'm going to realize that in order to do that, I better start eating healthier too. So then another vow might come that I'm going to not eat a lot of fried food, and I'm going to eat a more vegetarian diet, and I'm not going to drink, and I'm not going to smoke if those are the things that I do, right? And so then I think, yeah, and then so I better start getting better sleep. So then I'm going to make a vow that I need to go to sleep by 10 o'clock in the morning at night, and get up by whatever time, however many hours I need. So the one vow leads to other vows, which leads to other vows. But what are they doing to me? They're giving me control over my life. Now think about that. I'm starting to get control of my life. I'm no longer a victim to my desires or to my laziness or to my fears or to all those other things. So then somebody comes to me and says, oh, Ramdas, let's go do that. And say, well, I'm sorry, I can't, because I've made a commitment to myself. That's strength, right? Or then I think, oh man, somebody is going to have a great party, and they're going to have a big meal, and Renee has invited me over, and she's such an awesome cook. I can't say no, but I've made a commitment to stop eating at sunset, and her dinner's at 7:30 at night. So I have to say, thank you, but I can't go, right? And obviously Renee would understand it, right? But those are the kinds of things. So it's given me a strength to accomplish things by putting restrictions on my life. It's nobody else putting those restrictions, it's me. So when I put a restriction on my life, I'm actually giving myself strength. Now, in classical Indian music, there's a raga structure. Classical Indian music is not pieces. You don't like write a symphony. Classical Indian music, let's say a simple raga is C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, going up and going down. You can play those 7 notes going up. You can play those 7 notes going down, right? You don't play any flats. Okay? That's a simple raga. The more complex ragas restrict what notes you can play. And the most beautiful and meditative ragas only allow you to play 5 notes on the Aro and the Avro. Avro is the ascension and the descension of the scale. So you're limited on the notes that you can play. So what are you doing? You're limiting yourself. And as a result of it, it causes what Renée was just talking about, creativity. Because now I only have 5 notes to play on the going up and 5 notes to play on going down. So now I have to be much more creative. And that creativity is, it gives you a strength. So when you listen to the meditative ragas like Rag Bhairav, right? And you find those, the limitation of the notes. So there are some artists that will only use a particular medium, only pen, right? Or only this, or only that. And you look at the creativity, because they've limited themselves, they're forcing themselves now to become creative. And so in our lives, if we put limitations on ourselves, we're actually strengthening ourselves, because we're creating an environment where we have to learn to use the limited resources that I have allowed myself to accomplish something. So naturally, the result of it is going to be creativity. We lose creativity when we have easy access. I know Raj can relate to this. In India, if you go into the villages where there's no Costco, there's no Home Depot, there's no this, there's no that, and you need to get something done, it gets done very creatively. Right? I remember one time I was on a bus, because I lived for many years in the Himalayas, and I was going from below up above, and there was the buses that would take you, and these are buses on mountain roads, and those mountain roads can be really hell on those buses. And we're on the bus, and we stopped. So somebody maybe had to pee or something. And the bus driver, whenever we stop, he's kind of looking around, and he realizes there's an oil leak in the engine, right? What's he going to do? And so he looks underneath, and he realizes that underneath the engine, there's a pan that has the oil, and it's called the oil pan, right? And then there's a gasket that goes around there, and the gasket somehow broke, was torn, came apart or something, and so oil was coming out. So he looks at it, thinking about it, he goes up and he looks on the roof, and everybody's bringing their stuff that that are traveling. They all have it on the roof, and he noticed somebody has a bicycle there. He says, "Whose bicycle?" The guy says, he says, I need one of your tubes." Yeah, okay, go ahead. So he takes the tube out, takes a knife, and he makes a gasket out of the tube, puts it back up, and we head out. Right? It's that kind of creativity. Deal with the world around us. We want to change the world to fit us, rather than fitting in to the reality of the world. And so if I can't live without altering the world to fit me, then I become a victim of the world. If, on the other hand, I can fit into the world, then I'm free. And so the whole approach to vow taking is to say, I'm going to have less needs. I'm going to have less desires. I'm going to have less jealousies. I'm going to have less all the things that limit me and restrict me, all the things that make me incomplete. And that term, the term in Sanskrit is purana. Purana means complete. And when you are complete, you are fulfilled. When you are incomplete is when you are unhappy. And so if I want to be happy and I want to be free, I have to be complete. And so all the things that are making me incomplete, such as, oh, I'll feel better after I have a good dinner, or I'll feel better if somebody does this, or I'll feel better if they don't do that. All the ifs, if I have those ifs in my life, that means I have incompletenesses in my life. And then I become a victim to the expectations of those incompletenesses. If, on the other hand, you say, okay, whatever, right? Whatever happens. And you look at Gandhi. I mean, Gandhi's a perfect example of that. Gandhi let go of his needs. He saw no need for a need. And as a result of it, he was free. He could do whatever he wanted. And when I was a monk, that's what we were taught. I traveled, I had a bag that I carried with me, and the bag was maybe about 11 or 12 inches this way, and maybe this way it was about 8 or 9 inches, and this way it was about 3 or 4 inches. And then I had a blanket and a water pot, and that was it. Everything I owned was right there. And as a result of it, in other words, to be able to live with that, I had to let go of a lot of desires for things. And when you didn't have that, then there was very little to make me incomplete, because that bag made me complete. And one time, my teacher said to me, "Why are you carrying so much?" Because his bag was smaller, right? So it's all relative. One of my monastic brothers, the only thing that he wore, his only possessions, he wore a belt, and that belt was made out of a banana, the skin from a banana tree. You take it, it's about that, maybe about that thick, that wide. And then when it dries up, it kind of goes like this, and then you roll it, make a belt. And then you take another piece and put it between the belt to cover the genitals. That was his clothing. That was it. He had no blanket. He had a water pot that was a gourd pot. And that was it. That was his only possessions. And we talk. I mean, whenever I would spend time with him, I was always it was so fulfilling to see how fulfilled he was with nothing. Right? And of course, I'm not saying to any of you that's what you should do. But when we take a look at our lives and we look at the problems that we're facing, and I have stress over this, and I have this need, and I have this fear, and I have this expectation, and I have this and I have that. Those are all our creations. We have those because we've chosen them, and therefore we become victims to them. And when we start letting them go, so for example, my students, one of the things that I have my students do, and I'm teaching an Indian religions class this semester, and I talk about asceticism because you can't understand Hinduism, Jainism, or Buddhism without understanding asceticism. And I say to the students, but in order to really understand it, you have to have a bit of an experience of where they're coming from. So these ascetics, they fast, they keep silence, they go without hardly any sleep or very little clothes, or they don't alter the external to fit them. They alter themselves to fit where they are. And so I tell them, so for you to understand it, I'm going to have you do that. So I have my students for 24 hours. They have to fast, and they have to keep silence, and they have to turn off their phone. That's the hardest one. Some of them immediately say to me, I can't do that. And I tell them, well, then you can never be happy. If the difference between happiness and unhappiness is your phone, then you see where your biggest attachment is and your biggest obstacle to happiness. And so anyway, I have them turn off your phone, turn off your TV or your music, close all your books except books that we're using for this class. Don't say anything, don't eat anything. You can drink, you can drink try not to drink stimulants like coffee or tea, but you can drink juice or water for 24 hours. And many of the students, and I've done this for years, many of the students tell me at the end of the semester that one thing was probably the best they learned in the class, because they learned about themselves. And there's nothing I can say to them that'll teach them about themselves like that one. So, so I think we don't want to be victims in life, but those things that create my victimization are usually right here, right inside. And so if I want to stop being a victim, then all I have to do is look inside and find what it is that I have created attachments to that keep me from being free. And then you start working little by little. So sadhus typically take vows as a regular part of their life. I take vows all the time. Vows frame my existence, right? So whether it's the diet, whether it's how much I sleep, it's what I do, who I connect with, all of the kinds of things that we do in our lives. I find that by putting restrictions on myself, it gives me it's like a road. I say, go to Waimea Bay. Well, how do I get to Waimea Bay? Well, then there's a road, right? If there's no road, if there's no path, then it's going to be very hard for you to get there. And what is a path? A path is a set of restrictions. It's got one side and another side, and you go between it, right? And also that's what culture is. Think about it. If somebody says to you, maybe you go visit a place, a foreign culture, and they say, oh, where are you from? And you tell them, they say, well, what goes on in your place? What are you going to tell them? You're going to tell them your cultural traditions. Well, in our culture, we eat this and we don't eat that, and we do this and we don't do that, and we enjoy this and we don't enjoy that, etc., etc. So what are you really telling them? You're saying these are the walls within which we function. These are the limits within which we function. That's what culture is. Culture is a set of rules of what you do and what you don't do. And so, students say, oh yeah, I think culture is awesome. And then they say, but I want to be free. Well, if you're going to be free, then you don't appreciate culture, because culture is a set of restrictions. So you can create a continuum, and on one side there's culture, and the other end there's chaos. And either your life is going to be chaotic or cultured. And for most of us, hopefully there's probably someplace in the middle there. But it's all about restrictions. And so those restrictions define us. So Renée, you were talking about dance, and think about the restrictions in hula, right? And all those things that restrict. So my daughter, when she would dance, when she was in a halau and they performed at the Merry Monarch, and the preparation they had to do, and the fasting that they did, and the foods they couldn't eat, and etc. All of that was to prepare them. And that's what gives us strength. And so if you want to be strong, and you create the criteria, you create the guidelines in your life, you live within them, and you'll gain strength, and you'll no longer be a victim to the things that so many of us fall prey to. Okay, I'll stop there.
Wow, wonderful. Oh, thank you so much.
Sure.
It seems so practical. Did you find that it took you a while to actually be able to do what you vowed to do, or were you right away able to do it?
Okay, so before I went to India, I spent 2 years in the Marine Corps. Okay, and I learned how to follow orders in the Marine Corps. You don't you don't survive long if you don't follow orders, and that actually prepared me very much for being a sadhu. So when I went to India, not long thereafter, I arrived in India just about, well, not long after I got out of the Marine Corps. I had been living here, and I got out of the Marine Corps here, and then about a year after that, I went to India. And I met my teacher, and I realized that I really needed to learn, and I was ready to do what I needed to do to learn. So I was in a situation where I felt I had a real need that doing it would fulfill me. So I was ready to do whatever I was asked. And so it made it easier. Had I not been in that mindset, it would have been very difficult. So, you know, he sent me to his teacher, who was he was like a sadhu drill instructor. He would whip you into shape. And he lived in the jungle of central India. And so he said, I want you to go be with him. And so I was with him, and I would stay in his hut. And the way he would wake me up in the morning, always kick me in the head. Right? I would sleep on the floor at his feet. When he was up, he just kicked me. Like, okay, time to get up. Right? And that was typical of what went on throughout the day. And it was like I had nothing else to do but simply listen and do what I was told, because I knew that would get me what I needed. And it was awesome. I was fortunate that I could do that. So, but it's not easy, right? I was just in a very fortunate mindset at the time. I think at different times in my life, I would have said, who in the heck do you think you are? I'm not going to do any of that, right? So it's where we're at. It's what we're ready for. And I think we have to be ready to let go if we want to gain.
So it's that matter of what it is we desire at a soul level that would give us the wherewithal for following through on these vows.
There's a terrific Vedantic nun by the name of Pravajika Vrajapana. She lives in Ventura at the Vedanta Center in Ventura. She's been a Vedanta nun for probably 40 years. And she was telling me, I think she may have been from Southern California. But I remember once she was saying, when she was a kid, she's talking about how when something that is really meaningful comes, you can then let go of the things that all of a sudden you thought were meaningful before. And she said when she was a kid, she loved Barbie dolls, right? And that was her whole world. And then when she was 13, she heard the Beatles, and all of a sudden she didn't even look at the Barbie dolls anymore. Because something new came, and all of a sudden, all her other previous attachments were gone. The way you let go of something is by finding something more meaningful. So if we have attachments that we want to work on, just find something that's worth more to you, something that's more meaningful. And then the attachments they can go away pretty quick. But if we try to let go of an attachment without replacing it, that's like trying to get rid of darkness. You can't get rid of darkness. The only solution is to bring light. And when you bring light, darkness goes away automatically.
Let me open it up to all of you for any questions you may have, any comments, any personal experiences that you think have something to shed light on what it is Ramdas has shared with us.
Hi,
Yes.
Doris. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi. Yeah, I realize that I have a lot of attachment. Those of you that know me know about my handbag, which weighs a ton, and I keep so many things in it that just in case this situation happens or that situation happens. And for the first time, I guess, during the first shutdown back starting in March, I guess because I was just going out so just to the store and back. For the first time in years, I really whittled it down to just literally my credit card, some money, and something, just a few things that I would take with me. And so, I don't know, I have tremendous attachment to things.
And what did you find that did to you mentally?
I think part of it is, well, ironically, I don't like to suffer. So if, say I have a headache, I'm out and I'm not home and I have a headache, I like having, some ibuprofen in my bag so that I can, but what you're saying, and the way I was thinking is quite different. My attachment the cause of my suffering, as opposed to the way I thought it was. I have Band-Aids in my purse in case I cut myself, and I just have a whole bunch of things. But just wondering what your take on that would be. Well, and then so yeah, it was kind of freeing that I didn't have this 10-pound bag that I was, carrying around with me, that I just, with just a small light bag, able to run my errands, and, probably not throw my back out of whack, from all that extra weight I normally carry around.
Yeah. The stronger we become, the less we need. It's as simple as that. So when I was a kid, I was allergic to a lot of stuff. I essentially had to become a vegan when I was about 9 years old. I was allergic to meat, I was allergic to fish, I was allergic to milk products and these kinds of things. That's when my mom started making soy milk for me. You couldn't buy it in the store in those days. And she really limited my diet because I was allergic to so much, right? Then I had to leave home when I was 15, and I was living in a variety of places. And so I didn't take the medicines that I had taken for years. I couldn't afford them, and so I would get sick a lot. And I realized, I don't like this. I was sick of being sick. And Lao Tzu, the Chinese philosopher, says, only once you're sick of being sick will you stop being sick. And so I started reading books on health. And once I changed my diet radically, within about 6 months, my asthma, my hay fever, and all my allergies seemed to disappear. They just kind of went away. And it was because I had become strong. And then I realized that that's the same kind of strength that you can get for all sorts of things. Figure out what it is, where your weaknesses are, and become strong. That's all.
But I also realized too, I love to help people.
Sure.
And so, in having all these things in my purse, I love it when someone is in a situation and I have this multi-tool that will, fix whatever, or, I have some tissues if you need it. That, I think, is also a huge driver of.
So what you could think about then is, maybe I'll help people by listening to them. I'll help people by talking to them. I'll help people by sharing things that are meaningful to me as far as words and thoughts and feelings, because all of us need those, right? And those you can carry with you. You don't need a big bag for those because you are full of them, right? You are full of those things that you can share with others. So we just switch around the way we can help. And it's beautiful that you have the desire to help. So now that this gives you a way that you can help far more people, because you're no longer limited by things as a vehicle.
Mary, can you tell us what's on your mind?
I was thinking it goes back for what Doris is saying. We're mothers, and we have to anticipate every little thing that's going to happen with our children. And as we get older, then we don't have that immediate responsibility, but it's hard to break, and it's hard to realize that, okay, I can't be everything to everybody at the same time.
Yeah.
And I've done the same thing. I have removed things from my bag that I would have carried around. I've got salves, for itchies because the kids are mosquito bite, and now I have grandchildren are always, something is happening. But I think it's good to reevaluate our needs from time to time, because needs change as we age. Things that were no longer a problem now are rearing their ugly heads, and you have to make sure you find a bathroom where you have to know where the bathroom is. Always to keep in mind that when we can help someone, we'll do what we can. It doesn't necessarily have to be a physical thing, but like Ram said, listening.
Yeah.
Most of the times people just want somebody to listen to them and to acknowledge them.
Yeah. No, the ability to listen to people is so important. That's one of the greatest gifts that we can give someone, is time to just let them express stuff that's inside, right? And I think another lesson that's really important is to be able to accept advice, because people sometimes are empowered. When I'm talking to a student and they'll tell me something and I'll say, that's a really good idea. I never thought about that. They feel really good about themselves. To be able to acknowledge the benefits that others are to us is as important as talking to them and trying to help them as well.
Marian Yee, perhaps you are ready to speak.
Yes, Professor. I thought our assignment was to read the PDF that you attached to class.
Yeah, and I taught, and part of what I talked about today was what's in that PDF, right?
Yes, and I do have a question, because when I started reading the first 5 pages, I thought, wow, I am not worthy. And because you talked about the sadhu, or the devotee,
Yeah.
and the monastic life, and I felt I was not worthy because there was so much discipline, so much giving up of attachments, and to achieve this level of nirvana or wisdom, and the Karamana Dharma or restraint required for a monastic life. And I thought, wow, maybe I should not be attending the Zoom. But then I said, no, let me finish reading this. The reason why I do go to the Still Moving Center is because I'm trying to achieve some amount of discipline in my life. I'm trying to find a way to have devotion in my life. And I may not be a monastic person, but I'm attached to the material world. And I figured, well, and I kept on reading your assignment further, and I realized that, maybe what I can do is achieve bhakti or devotion.
Sure.
That is, and I realized, gee, that's what I've been doing this last 5 years at Still Moving Center, because I'm looking for to yoga classes, and I look for places where I can go to kirtan and do mantras and go to spiritual satsangs and try to achieve some amount of philosophy in my life where I can find my path to devotion. Can you please comment on that?
Yeah. First of all, I think when I started out, I mentioned that article is not for everybody. Not all parts of the article. I think there's parts of it, and I think you saw the parts that are useful. I don't think the world has to become we don't have to all become renunciants. And I'm going to mention 2 teachers, pearls of wisdom from each of them. One of them is Thomas Merton, and the other is the present Dalai Lama. Thomas Merton, shortly before he died in 1968, he was traveling with a friend of his who actually wrote a biography. Because Thomas Merton was a Catholic monk, he was restricted by what he could write. The Catholic Church censored everything that he wrote. And so it had to go through the official censorship line. So there were things that he couldn't say. And so he wrote under a pseudonym for some things. And then he had a friend, I think his name was Edward Rice. And he wrote a book called The Man in the Sycamore Tree. And you should read it. If you're interested in Merton, The Man in the Sycamore Tree is a really beautiful book. He says in there about Merton had gone to India before going to Thailand. He died in Thailand. He was at a monastic conference in Thailand, but he'd gone to India first. And he was just talking about how impressed he was with Indian women and just the way they lived. And he said, today is not the day of the celibate monk. We need to raise families. We need to have spiritual families. And so he didn't see that the monastic life was all that necessary. Now, the Dalai Lama, when the Dalai Lama has been here several times, Dalai Lama came in, I think the first time that he was here that I remember was, and he came and talked at our department because one of the women in our department was a Tibetan Buddhist nun. She was getting an MA in our department. And so he came and he spoke with our department. It was very nice. And one of the grad students said to him, so you're traveling around the world, are you out preaching Buddhism? And he said, no. He says, religion is for people with time on their hands. Most of us don't have time on their hands. He says, compassion. You don't need religion. You need compassion. That's something all of us can do. And I think in the same way, I would say, you don't need the ascetic life, but we need compassion, and we need wisdom, and we need devotion. And bhakti is devotion. Now, when if you get an idea about the ascetics, and I could show you some images, and you'd think, those people are really extreme in what they do. And yet, devotion is central to that way of life as well. Because you have to be truly devoted to be able to do it. Right? So wherever you find devotion, and it can be devotion in going to Still Living Center, and doing regular sessions, chanting kirtan, as you mentioned, all of those take commitment, because you've made a commitment in your life, and that's why you're doing those things. You've made a commitment to yourself for growth. So you're already making a commitment, and you're already doing the things that are moving you on that path. Each person's path will look a little different, right? So your path doesn't have to look like my path, or Renee's path, or Maurice's path. Each of us are different, but that path has to be fulfilling to you. At the end of the day, you need to be able to come home and say, today was an awesome day. And it was beautiful. And if I die tomorrow, that's fine. I had a good day.
Sharon, I know you're there listening intently. Would you like to share a question or comment?
The more we attach ourselves to different things, the more unhappy we are. And the less we have, the happier we probably can be. So I'm following what he said. Thank you for asking.
I always know you're back there with this deep heart listening.
I think of the gurus in my past, and one of them, Bob Dylan, and in a line in one of his songs, when the Rolling Stone, when you ain't got nothing, you got nothing to lose, right? And I think about that often, when we can live in saying that nothing belongs to me, right? Everything is the divine's, and I just participate. I'm fortunate to be able to have it. In Hindi, the verb to have is rarely ever used. To us, it'd be hard to go through a whole day without using that verb. But the verb to have, rakna, hardly ever used. What I'll say is it's near me. Mere pas kitab means there's a book near me, but I'm not actually attaching possession to it. Traditionally, that's the way it was understood. Now people think that mere pas means I have, but it doesn't actually mean that. It simply means it's near me. So we use things in the world, and they're here for us to use, but we should let go of the possession. And I think the one thing that we should never possess are the people who we love, because we want freedom for ourselves, and they should have freedom too. And I think the greatest love is to be able to give a person a freedom to be themselves. Hi, Raj, go ahead.
Maurice, can I ask you if you have anything to add to this subject? You're somebody that I know has spent time in India and other places in the world, and who lives a simple life deliberately.
Ramdas, thank you. Thank you very much. I was someone who has been or is a sadhu before. So it's like an amazing kind of experience. And I'm really struck by the kind of commitment to self-discipline beyond the Marine Corps that, I guess I did, of course, I have a lot of questions. I could probably sit with you for hours, but when sadhus walk around and observe things, discipline themselves, they're probably always meditating on something. And of course, it's everyone's choice and everyone's free to meditate, et cetera, et cetera. But obviously, if people are doing it for a few years, is there some kind of aim or end? What is it other than just self-discipline, and does it involve higher spirituality?
Sure, absolutely. And Raj, also, I got your question, so I'm going to answer that in a part of this. Thank you. What Raj asked is, does fasting help to control the mind, the senses, and the desires? So we can talk about that. But when you become, okay, so when I became a sadhu, and I'll talk about myself, my monastic order is the largest order in the world. There's nearly 3 million sadhus in that order. In fact, in India, it's about 70% of the sadhus in India today are part of the same order. So I can speak about, I'm talking about a lot of sadhus when I'm talking about that. And generally speaking, within the order, every moment should be ritual. Every moment should be sadhana. And the term sadhana means the path to truth. So everything that I do, when I'm cooking, when I'm walking, when I'm teaching, it should be done with the idea that this is bringing fulfillment to me and service to others. And if I think that way, then it affects everything that I do, right? When I talk to my students, I begin the beginning of the semester in many of my classes, and I'll talk to the students about that, about sadhana, and the importance of making your life a ritual. And if we make our lives a ritual, then we're going to make it, it's going to be righteous. The term dharma, the two terms that I use for translating dharma is both righteousness and goodness. And if we're good about everything we do, if I'm able to come home at the end of the day, and like I said earlier, and to say today was a good day, I think I clearly learned something, and I was able to help somebody, and I didn't hurt anybody. If we can answer those 3 questions that way, at the end of the day, we've lived a beautiful day. My teacher once said to me, Ramdas, I want you to help 12 people in the world. And if you can change 12 people's lives, you will have done more than 99% of the population of the world. So don't think big, change yourself, and in the process, help a dozen people. Now, hopefully I hope I've helped a few more, but we should look at it that way. But does that answer your question?
Yes, just one other piece. Is there any philosophical texts or anything, or study of
Yeah.
or anything, or is it?
Okay, so our primary text is the Tulsi Ramayana, the Hindi Ramayana. And there's a verse in there that the brother of Ram, Bharat, says. And he says, Arthana Dharma Nakama Ruchi. And the four fruits of life in the Hindu tradition, wealth, sensual pleasure, spiritual merit, and liberation. And Bharat says, I don't want any of them. Then he says, Janama Janam Rati Rama Pada. He says, birth after birth, all I want is devotion to the feet of God. Serving others. Okay. So the Bodhisattva vow that to come back simply to serve others. And that, in our tradition, that's really the goal. The goal is not to get liberated. The goal is to be liberated from my desires, my fears, my ignorance, so that I can truly help others. Because that's when you can truly help others, when you're not, when we're free of those obstacles, right? Now, how do we do that? Raj asked about fasting. Fasting is so powerful. I fast every Tuesday, and I've been doing it most of the last 50 years. And what it does for me is it gives me a break. And so Tuesday becomes my special day. It's the day where I spend, if I'm not teaching, I keep in silence. This semester I'm teaching on Tuesday night, so I have all day. But it gives me a time to reconnect. It's a time to clean up. It's like rebooting the computer. Reboot your life, and I take that 24 hours to just reflect. We can go for long periods of fasting. Raj, you asked. I fasted once for 40 days. And during that time, because my teacher had told me, because he knew that I liked fasting for long periods. And so he told me, whenever you fast, I want you to eat a little bit of yogurt every day just to keep the bacillus, keep the digesting energy going in your stomach. So I was at an ashram in South India where I did this. And so they would give me like a little cup of maybe about 4 or 5 ounces of yogurt every day. And then I would have a small cup of orange juice and then herb tea. And in 40 days, at the end of 40 days, I had lost 2 pounds. And it was because of the practices that I did. So most of us eat far more than we need. Most of us can go for long periods without eating. But it's an attachment. It's an assumption that we have. But when I fast, what it does is it clears me from thinking about food. Well, ideally, some people then think about food all day long when they fast. But if we do it with the idea that I'm taking a break from essentially a sensual fulfillment and a habit, because most of us eat out of habit, not out of need. And then it gives us an opportunity to think about our lives and to think about what is meaningful. What do I really need? And sometimes I do that. I just sit and I think, what do I need? Actually, I don't need anything. Right? And that's the amazing thing, is that most of us, if we sit down, we realize we don't really need much of anything. And then we look around at what we have and we go, whoa, there's a bit of a disjunct. But it teaches us, and so I think that if I like fasting because it gives us a chance to step back from life and just look at it. I'm not involving myself in those things, and I can sit back and watch life. And I'll end with this in the Upanishads. There's I think it's in the Shvetashvatara Upanishad, and it talks about 2 birds, and there's 2 birds in a tree, and the one bird is going around from fruit to fruit on the tree and testing it to see if that's the fruit to eat, or if that's the fruit it wants to eat, or that's the fruit. And then there's the other bird that sits back and simply watches that bird. And this is the 2 selves. the self that gets involved in the world, and then a self that watches. And the verse in the Upanishads ends with, be the watcher.
Thank you. I see that Sharon has her hand raised, and then I just noticed we're past our hour. We're way past our hour. And I didn't notice it flew right past. Sharon, go ahead, please.
I want to ask you that during this pandemic time, because we're in quarantine, does this give us an opportunity for those who receive it to do this fasting of silence and thinking about ourselves, or thinking within ourselves who we are and stuff?
Absolutely. I have a very close friend who is a Hindu renunciant, and she's in India, and we talk from time to time. She teaches there, and she and I are very close. And she said to me a couple of months ago, she says, I don't call it the coronavirus, I call it the karuna virus. Karuna means compassion. And she said, in many ways, we have all been blessed to stop what we're doing, to just watch. And if all of us would do that, now some of us can't do that. I mean, my villagers, and I've been working in this one particular village for the last 40 years. People there are starving to death because they can't go out and work, right? And that's sad. But in every cloud, there is a silver lining. And in this cloud, I think the silver lining is many of us actually do have the opportunity to step back and to say, what do I really need? Do I really need anything? Right? And some of us realize that really to be with the people who I love, to share with the people who I love. And, think about it. If today was, if I was diagnosed that this was the last day of my life, what would I do? Who would I connect with? What would I do? As a monk, that's something that we used to say, and that was something that was a part of what we would share with people, is work as if you shall live forever. In other words, everything that you do, make it as good as possible, but live like you're going to die tomorrow. So make today fulfilling, self-fulfilling, because it may be the last day you have.
Ramdas, I don't think we can thank you enough for that really illuminating talk. It was just so to the heart, and something that I think each of us can take something with into our lives.
Great. Thank you very much.
Really helpful.
I totally appreciated it.
Maybe we're your 12 people that you've made the difference to. I think we're probably just a small 12 of all the people that you've helped, but certainly we are indebted.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you everyone for sitting in. And Dominica, nice seeing you again. Great. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you ever so much, all of you, and particularly Ramdas.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Namaste.
Namaste.
Aloha.